Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we help you cut through all the noise and get right to the good stuff.
Love that.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into PJT Partners, Inc.,
Okay.
a major player, in the world of high finance.
Yep.
And you know what's really cool about this one?
What's that?
You have provided us with their 10K reports from 2020 to 2023.
All right.
So we're going deep.
Let's do it.
We're going beyond, just reading those dry financial statements to uncover what makes this company tick.
Yeah, these reports, they can feel a little bit like you're trying to decipher some kind of secret code.
Mm-hmm.
But when you know how to read them, they actually reveal some really fascinating insights into not just PJT Partners operations, but also their strategies and even their company culture.
Okay, so for anyone who maybe hasn't encountered PJT Partners before, let's start with the basics. What exactly do they do?
So in a nutshell, PJT Partners is a global advisory firm.
Okay.
But they're not just your typical number crunchers, they're not just looking at spreadsheets all day.
Right.
They act as strategic advisors for their clients, guiding them through all sorts of complex business challenges, things like mergers and acquisitions, or even navigating a company through, some really rough financial waters.
And looking at the 10Ks, it seems like they've got their hands in a few different cookie jars, right?
They do. They do. The reports highlight three main business areas.
Yeah.
Restructuring and special situations. PJT Park Hill and PJT Camberview.
Catchy names.
Yeah, they roll off the tongue.
So tell me a little bit about those different arms.
So the first one, restructuring and special situations, that one's pretty self-explanatory, right? Helping out companies that are in distress.
Right.
Then you've got PJT Park Hill, which focuses on raising capital for alternative investments.
Okay.
So think private equity, hedge funds, that sort of thing.
Got it.
And lastly, there's PJT Camberview.
Okay.
And they advise companies on anything and everything related to their investors and how they govern themselves.
So a pretty diverse portfolio.
Definitely.
But here's something I found intriguing when I was going through it, and tell me if this is something that you noticed too.
Okay.
The 10Ks mention that PJT Partners, Inc. wasn't, built from the ground up.
Right.
They're actually the result of a merger and a spinoff from the Blackstone Group.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a pretty big deal, right?
Absolutely. That's a crucial detail. I think, sometimes we can overlook the history of these companies, but this backstory is really important because it tells us that PJT Partners didn't just appear out of thin air.
Right.
They emerged from a financial powerhouse, and that's got to have shaped their approach, right?
Yeah.
And it could even influence the risks that they face today.
Totally. Now that we've got a handle on, kind of their background, where they came from, their history, let's talk about something that truly surprised me while I was going through these reports,
Right.
especially the 2023 one.
Okay.
They put a huge emphasis on company culture,
Interesting.
which I have to admit is not something I usually expect from a Wall Street firm.
Yeah, you don't typically see that, right?
No.
Yeah,
It's like they're trying to break the mold of what it means to be a big-time financial firm.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really trying to challenge those preconceived notions, right? Like you said, the finance world, particularly at PJT Partners level, it's often seen as this ruthlessly competitive environment,
Right.
where it's all about profits over everything else. So for them to come right out and say, hey, we prioritize things like character and collaboration,
Yeah.
it's pretty bold.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're saying, like, we're not just here to play the game, we're here to change it.
Exactly.
But it's not just talk, is it? Like, they actually seem to walk the walk when it comes to building this culture.
They do. The 10Ks mention that they actually use things like employee surveys.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and other feedback mechanisms to really gauge how their employees are feeling and to pinpoint, areas for improvement. And that constant evaluation suggests to me that they're serious about creating not just a positive work environment, but a productive one as well.
Right. And what's the general consensus? What are the employees saying?
So consistently, the reports emphasize a really strong sense of respect among colleagues
Okay.
and a shared commitment to doing right by their clients and by the company itself.
Got it.
It seems like they've cultivated an environment where people feel valued
Yeah.
and they feel empowered to, bring their A game to work.
Which makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about how competitive it is to attract and retain top talent in that industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Nobody wants to work in a toxic environment, no matter how big the paycheck is.
Exactly. And you know what? PJT Partners knows that. In fact, their 2020 10K specifically calls out their remarkably low regretted attrition rate.
Wow.
Yeah. So they clearly see their culture as a secret weapon in the war for talent.
It's really clever how they've woven this idea of a strong company culture into the narrative of their financial success.
Right.
It's as if they're saying our culture isn't just about making our employees happy. It's about driving better outcomes, for the business.
Absolutely.
But let's be real for a second here. Even with the best intentions, maintaining a strong company culture can be a challenge,
Oh, for sure.
especially in, the high-stakes world of finance.
Yeah, you're right. And speaking of challenges, there's a whole section in these 10Ks dedicated to the risks that PJT Partners acknowledges. It's like they're laying all their cards on the table.
Now, that's what I call transparency.
Right.
It actually makes me more curious about their vulnerabilities. What are some of the key risks that they're facing?
So one of the things that I noticed that I thought was really interesting is how they address their reliance on key personnel,
Okay.
particularly their founder, Paul Taubman.
Right.
So while they do invest heavily in developing new talent, they openly acknowledge the potential impact of losing a figure like that.
That makes you realize that even in a massive company like that, individuals can still have a huge influence.
Yeah.
What is it about Mr. Taubman's role that makes him so crucial to their success?
Well, it's not just his title. Mr. Taubman is really deeply involved in shaping their overall strategy, and he's super hands-on when it comes to nurturing those really important client relationships.
Right.
So he's seen as kind of a driving force behind their success.
So losing him could be a real blow, even if they have a strong bench of up-and-comers.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, though, how sustainable is that kind of business model?
Right.
One that relies so heavily on a few star players.
Yeah, that's a risk they definitely acknowledge head on.
Okay.
The 2023 filing actually talks about the challenges of not just finding, but also keeping top-tier talent, especially as competition heats up in the financial sector.
Right.
They even go so far as to point out the potential impact of future regulations on non-compete clauses.
Oh, wow.
Which could make it easier for employees to jump ship.
It's like trying to hold on to a winning team when, everybody's offering them these crazy lucrative contracts.
Exactly.
It goes beyond just having a great culture at that point.
Yeah.
You got to navigate this constantly evolving legal landscape and stay ahead of the curve when it comes to, managing your talent pool.
Yeah, it's a constant battle.
Right. And while we're on the topic of, potential risks, they also bring up the issue of employee misconduct.
Right.
Particularly when it comes to confidential client information.
Yeah, that's a big one. Trust is absolutely paramount in their line of work.
Yeah, I imagine.
And the 10Ks really emphasize their commitment to preventing any misuse or disclosure of client information.
Okay.
They know that it's not just a legal risk, but a reputational one that could seriously damage client relationships.
For sure. And in this digital age, I bet cybersecurity is a major concern too.
Oh, absolutely. Their 2023 10K actually goes into great detail about their cybersecurity measures.
Okay.
They even mention having a dedicated cyber incident response plan.
Oh, wow.
And a whole team that's responsible for, tackling these threats.
To stay ahead of it.
Yeah. So it's reassuring to see that they're not taking any chances.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. PJT Partners' history, their unique culture, and even some of those potential vulnerabilities that kind of keep them on their toes.
It's a balancing act.
Before we wrap things up, I do want to touch on a few financial highlights
Okay.
that stood out to me from the reports.
Yeah, for sure.
The 2023 filing mentions that PJT Partners, Inc. is now considered a large accelerated filer.
Right.
Could you break down what that means for those of us who aren't fluent in, SEC jargon?
Yeah. So basically it means that they've hit certain financial milestones,
Okay.
particularly in terms of their public float.
Got it.
Think of it as the value of their shares that are available to the public.
Okay.
This classification basically indicates that, they're playing in the big leagues now. And they have to be even more transparent with their finances.
Which, honestly, more transparency, usually a good sign for investors.
Absolutely.
Another thing that caught my eye was their dividend payments.
Okay.
They actually bumped them up in 2022.
What does that tell us?
Well, increasing dividends can be a sign of, confidence in their future earnings.
Okay.
It's like they're saying, hey, we're doing well, and we want to share the wealth with our investors.
Now, there was one last thing that I have to confess I think went a little bit over my head.
Okay.
The tax receivable agreement.
Right.
Can you explain that in a way that won't make my brain melt?
I'll do my best. In essence, it's an agreement that's tied to their spinoff from Blackstone.
Okay.
And it basically means that PJT Partners might have to share a portion of any future tax benefits they get from certain assets.
with those original Blackstone stakeholders.
Okay, so even though they're a separate company now, there are still some financial strings attached to that past relationship.
Yeah, you got it.
Why should this matter to someone who's not, a financial expert?
Well, I think it's a great illustration of how complex these corporate structures can be
Yeah?
and how, mergers and acquisitions can have these really long-lasting implications.
Wow.
It also shows that even seemingly technical financial details can have a real impact on a company's bottom line and their obligations to different stakeholders.
This deep dive has been truly eye-opening.
Yeah.
We've gone from decoding, these dry 10K reports to uncovering the human side of this financial powerhouse.
It's been fun.
We've explored their unique culture, their commitment to ethical conduct, and even those potential vulnerabilities that keep them on their toes as they continue to grow.
It's a wild world out there.
It really is. And as you continue to explore the world of PJT Partners, here's a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
They've done a remarkable job of building a strong company culture in an industry often associated with, cutthroat competition.
For sure.
The question is, can they maintain this culture as they grow and face new challenges?
Right.
It'll be fascinating to see what the future holds.